All right, happy Monday. Welcome to February and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for February the 3rd, 2025, the 5th Monday of the year, and it's National Golden Retriever Day, one of the absolute best breeds of dogs for sure. On the food calendar, it's hashtag National Carrot Cake Day. So no matter how bad a Monday you may have, and if you're in the financial industry, it could be a bad one. More on that in a minute. But at least you have an excuse to eat some carrot cake and make things a little bit better. Yesterday was Groundhog Day. If you missed it, Punxsutawney Phil did see his shadow, predicting 6 more weeks of winter, which many areas of the country are experiencing today. I hope you had a fantastic and safe weekend doing whatever it is you love to do. I went to a wedding this weekend in Tampa, Florida. A lot of people from New York were there, and surprisingly, mostly MAGA. A lot of Newsmax viewers and some podcast listeners. What was really interesting is a lot of them were not only Newsmax viewers, but anti-Fox people. Unhappy over how Fox treated Trump, and they never went back. Some of them also unhappy over the whole Tucker Carlson thing and never went back. President Trump was also in Florida for the weekend. He went home to Mar-a-Lago, played golf at Trump National in West Palm Beach. That's where the Secret Service nabbed the guy in the hedges as he was preparing to shoot Trump a few months ago. Remember that? The second assassination attempt. His announced tariffs against Mexico, Canada, and China. No doubt the headline of the weekend, and that's what everyone is talking about today. He was asked about it as he returned to the White House last night.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street.
Trump speaking next to Marine One as he returned to the White House last night. He did post similar comments on his Truth Social yesterday. Mexico and Canada especially are promising retaliation. This is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I think Canadians are a little perplexed as to why our closest friends and neighbors are choosing to target us. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people.
And yes, he is resigning, but not until they have a new prime minister in place. That is mostly going to dominate the news today. Vice President J.D. Vance is in East Palestine, Ohio today, the 2-year anniversary of the toxic train derailment there, February 3rd, 2023. Another community that feels like it was treated unfairly and slighted by the Biden administration. This is RNC Chair Michael Whatley on Newsmax.
Chairman, you were standing next to Donald Trump last week in North Carolina. It was so powerful as we heard from people who were victims. Really, he gave the voice to the voiceless. And that news conference was so powerful. We also know J.D. Vance will be going to East Palestine on Monday after that toxic train derailment. A lot of people who have felt forgotten with these disasters. In our final moments here, tell us about the response now. We know FEMA will be reevaluated, but there were so many Americans that natural disasters and the government simply failed them under the last administration, sir.
Yeah, the president and the vice president are both fundamentally committed to making sure that the people of North Carolina, the people of California, the people of Ohio are not going to be forgotten. I think it is very important that the first trip the president made was to North Carolina and California following the damage that we saw from the hurricane and the fires, and let them know that America is going to be there for them. They're not going to be forgotten. And this is why the American people voted in record numbers for the president and for the vice president.
For more on giving the people what they voted for, this is Newsmax host Lydia Serrani on Sunday Report.
Love him or hate him, no one can deny that President Trump is determined to fulfill every promise. Promise made, promise kept. Trump vowed to go to war on woke, and he is already winning. He never gets tired of winning. Government programs on gender and diversity have been dismantled. Their websites now page not found. Federal employees can also no longer use their pronouns in their signatures. Plus, no more X on official documents like your passports as your gender. But most importantly, Trump is saving lives by making DEI die. Trump signed an executive order directing that children will no longer be chemically castrated and surgically mutilated using federal tax dollars. And hospitals that continue this barbaric child abuse will also lose federal funding.
Any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare, and will be terminated from the program immediately.
Trump also immediately signed into law the Laken Riley Act, named after the Georgia nursing student who was murdered and raped by an illegal alien. The Laken Riley law will now allow cops to detain illegals who commit crimes.
We also want to thank President Trump for the promises he made to us. He said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken. And he hasn't. He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people.
The American people, so brainwashed by the woke's leftist lies that they marched in the streets to support Hamas terrorists. One of Trump's many executive orders now calls for the deportation of resident aliens, including students with visas, who broke laws as part of pro-Hamas protests following the October 7th massacre in Israel. Israeli hostages continue to be reunited with their loved ones. It's amazing, right? After Trump simply threatened that there would be, quote, hell to pay if they weren't released. Where was Joe Biden for 15 months, huh? 6 Americans held hostage in Venezuela also now free after Trump's special envoy, Rick Grinnell, visited Maduro. Grinnell also focused on ensuring that 400 members of the brutal Tren de Aragua prison gang in U.S. custody will now be returned back to Venezuela. They got to take them back. And rather than applaud Trump for everything he's accomplished in, less than 2 weeks? Here's what MSDNC is saying.
On a fascism scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being peak fascism, how would you rate Trump's first week?
Delta smelt. Look, he just says anything that he wants to say. How many stories I have to read that the Delta smelt has nothing to do with this? But he's just going to keep plowing through, okay? And what we have to learn as Democrats, just let him punch himself out.
You saw that look on her face, so smug. And notice not even James Carville, who's probably more left than Bernie Sanders. He wouldn't even take the bait on that one. Trump isn't a fascist. Trump is the greatest Democratic leader in modern history at this point, right? This is what the people voted for. He is fulfilling a mandate given to him by 77 million Americans. But, what else do you expect from MSDNC?
That's Lydia Serrani on yesterday's Sunday report. She mentioned the hostages freed from Venezuela, which has agreed to take back its people that are in this country illegally, as has Colombia and Mexico, even though they're going to retaliate on the tariffs. Let's remember that today is exactly 2 weeks since Inauguration Day. Lydia mentioned a few things, but Trump has deployed troops to the border to enhance security, started deportation flights for criminal illegal immigrants, shut down the CBP One app, reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy, which again, Mexico has agreed to, signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, designated cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, added Cuba back to the state sponsor of terrorism list. One of the very last things President Biden did on his way out the door was take Cuba off the sponsor of terrorism list. Abolished diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, offices within the Department of Defense, designated 2 genders, reinstated service members who were wrongfully discharged for refusing the COVID vaccine and ordered back pay for all of them, opened up offshore drilling and allowed more energy exploration in Alaska, and declared a national energy emergency. That's about half of what he's done in 2 weeks. And created the Department of Government Efficiency, which took action against U.S. Agency for International Development, known as USAID, over the weekend. That's going to be a big story today as well. That is the department that doles out literally tens of billions of dollars in foreign aid, meaning tens of billions of dollars to other countries. This is what Elon Musk, the head of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, said about it.
As we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms.
About 100 people from USAID were placed on leave after they refused to give Musk's team access to classified materials, which they eventually were given access to, leading to the comments from Elon Musk. And on Saturday, while you were hopefully having fun, Hamas released the first American hostage in Gaza after holding him for more than 480 days, 65-year-old Keith Siegel. Newsmax covered it live on America Right Now with Tom Basili.
3 hostages held since the October 7th massacre, including the first American Israeli to be released by Hamas, are back with their families this morning. Newsmax senior correspondent John Huddy is live from Israel with more. John.
Yeah, Tom, it definitely wasn't the chaotic scene that we saw on Thursday with the release of hostages Thursday when they were paraded in front of a crowd and the crowd pushing in several thousand people on those hostages. Today, it was a much more controlled environment. That's because Israeli officials, including the prime minister, warned Hamas not to create such a dangerous, terrifying spectacle. That said, as you mentioned, one of those hostages released was 65-year-old Keith Siegel, a dual legal Israeli U.S. citizen who was abducted on October 7th from the kibbutz Kfar Aza. He was turned over to the Red Cross at the port of Gaza in Gaza City in this kind of, again, a propaganda spectacle, this so-called quote-unquote release ceremony. He was paraded in front of a crowd before then being turned over to the Red Cross. He looked pale and thin, but otherwise was able to walk on his own, Tom. Siegel's wife, Aviva, was also taken hostage and released back in November of 2023. They have been reunited today. Also this morning, Hamas released 54-year-old Ofer Calderon and 35-year-old Yarden Bibas. Calderon's two children were released back in November of 2023, but we are still awaiting word about the fate of Yarden Bibas' wife, Cherie, and their children, little Kafir, who was only 9 months old when he was abducted, the youngest hostage taken, and his brother Ariel, who was 4 at the time. Hamas says that they were killed in captivity, but there remains a collective hope here, Tom, and we talked about this last night, that they are still alive. However diminished that may be at this point, people are still hoping, and Israel is putting pressure on Hamas to release any and all information about the Bibas family. In exchange, as part of this phase 1 of this ceasefire and the hostage exchange, Israel released 183 Palestinian prisoners. We thought it was only 100, but we found out today that it was 183, several doing life sentences for terrorist attacks in Israel and the West Bank. One, actually, who was sentenced to 17 life sentences for killing and orchestrating a bombing that killed 17 people back in 2002. And one final note, the Rafah crossing in southern Gaza has been reopened, heading into Egypt to allow people, patients with medical conditions, to get treatment in Egypt. Tom, back to you.
Another momentous day in Israel, but the question will be whether or not we're going to be refighting this war all over again.
Tom Basile, host of America Right Now, Saturday mornings, 9 o'clock Eastern, with senior Newsmax correspondent John Huddy live in Gaza. And you heard Huddy say one of the 180 prisoners Israel released, on top of the hundreds of others, was a terrorist serving 3 life sentences. This is not a good deal, obviously. Great that the hostages are being released, obviously, but do you think those terrorists, the hundreds of terrorists that are being released in exchange for the hostages, are all going to go home now and just lead some kind of a normal life? I doubt it. The third service member of the Army Black Hawk helicopter that crashed into the commercial jet near Washington, D.C. last week, killing 67 people in all, the mysterious female pilot that everybody had been asking about at the end of last week, was identified over the weekend as Captain Rebecca Lobach of Durham, North Carolina. This is part of the NTSB's weekend news conference.
At the time of the accident, there were 5 controllers in the air traffic control tower cab at DCA. One was a local controller, which was handling not only helicopter, but fixed-wing aircraft. The local controller also would be handling arrivals and departures close in airspace and the use of the runway. There was a ground controller, which was handling all aircraft and vehicles not on the runway. In addition, there was a local assist controller. This person is responsible for assisting the local controller in any type of actions that are needing, reviewing data, scanning the field, a multitude of different things. You will not hear the assistant controller on any of the ATC tapes, but we can confirm that person was in the cab. In addition, there's an operations supervisor who has direct oversight over the tower. This is someone who manages everyone that's involved in the operation, along with an operational supervisor in training. That leads us to confirm there were 5 people in the tower at the time of the accident. At this time, we have interviewed the local controller, the ground controller, and the local assist controller. We anticipate having the interviews with the operations supervisor and the supervisor in training conducted no later than Monday evening. And for a little bit of context, this is a controller's worst nightmare. It hits everyone that works in that cab and knows them very hard. These interviews take a long time, not because there's that much talking, but there's several breaks that occur for emotions, just to be able to compose themselves to talk about what happened. We want to be thorough. If we need to go back for additional information, we absolutely will. We're getting full cooperation and access to those individuals we need. And we hope, again, to have them completed no later than Monday.
So that clears up some of the confusion or misinformation about the control tower and air traffic controllers. The NTSB and others are also now investigating Friday night's medical jet crash in Northeast Philadelphia that killed 7 people, including an 11-year-old girl and her 31-year-old mother. That plane's voice recorder was recovered yesterday. And a United Airlines flight from Houston to New York City had to abort takeoff due to a fire in one of the wings.
I could feel the plane going super fast, like we were about to take off. And all of a sudden, it felt like it slammed back to the ground. People were screaming. There were people jumping over the seats trying to get off the plane.
A statement from the FAA said the flight was safely aborted because of reported engine issues. President Trump will no doubt deliver remarks about tariffs today and any potential news from the other countries surrounding the tariffs, with the stock market opening sharply lower as well in response to that. Most cryptocurrencies sharply lower as well. Bitcoin is back down to $95,000 this morning in what likely is an overreaction as Mexico and Canada promise retaliation. Over the weekend, Republican Senators Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Eric Schmitt of Missouri both spoke out in support of Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. Schmitt was on NBC's Meet the Press and said that she served our country honorably in the military. She's been a member of Congress, and I think she strikes a really important balance for a key position of civil liberties, protecting civil liberties for United States citizens, and also our national security. Lindsey Graham was on Fox News Sunday, said that he served in the reserve with Tulsi and spoke highly of her as well. And again, Vice President Vance is in East Palestine, Ohio today, hopefully to bring some good news and encouragement on the 2nd anniversary of that toxic train derailment there. Be sure to keep up with all of the news and breaking developments throughout the day. There will likely be plenty of them on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. It all begins each and every day with Wake Up America, Bianca De La Garza, American Agenda, Carl Higbee on Frontline, Greta Van Susteren on The Record, Rob Schmitt, John Bachman, Finnerty, Greg Kelly reports, and much, much more, with expert analysis from people like Senator Rick Santorum, political analyst Mark Halpern, Judge Napolitano, Hogan Gidley, Professor Dershowitz, and more. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Maybe eat some carrot cake and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.